Let me just make sure I'm online on YouTube as well. I feel that my volume from microphone was too much, maybe. So I'm gonna put the microphone away like this. Test, 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 test. Hopefully this is better. But we will see later. I watched the videos of the recording yesterday, and man, like my cheeks are flaring up so much. Both of them are what's it called? Inflamed, because I'm having to use this serum 1 more week until the lasering. And I don't know, I'm gonna have to ask him if I should stop taking it before the lasering a few days or so, because it gets the skin very irritated. Maybe that's supposed to be like this. I don't know. I was barely able to eat. I didn't have the energy to cook. I should have made some oatmeal. I just put in a pizza, and didn't even eat half of it. This is all I ate today. For me, food appetite is the number one indicator if you're healthy or if you're sick. If you're in a bad spot. So yeah. Watched a bunch of YouTubes today, a lot. Hours. Everyone's saying to move on, how to move on. And it's rough because everybody says it's gonna get better and stuff and stuff. It's going on for so long. Now we're gonna have to dive deeper into psychology. So we're gonna watch a few more videos today. Some of them might end up on YouTube. I hope my internet is gonna be stable because it's been very bad internet. I got like every hour I got like a disconnect for a few minutes, more than 10 minutes. It's been stable the last 2 hours. So I pray. And tomorrow the internet guy is gonna come and check it out. What have I done? Time goes by fast. People die. They get sick. I'm not even jealous or something anymore. I don't care if she meets other people also. I truly mean it. It's like something clicked. Yeah, I want to marry her and only be mine, but whatever she does now, I don't give a fuck. It was one of the big fights we had 10 years ago. She loved me crazy, like crazy. She was dependent on me, and that's what turned me off. And then we had fights and stuff, and said I don't want to. And then she gets into a relationship a few months later, and I get mad. At the time, she was gone long distance. I remember the day. I woke up without her, and she packed her stuff, and she was out. I cried so much. I cried so much. But I thought it's for the better. So she tries again, years later, 2 years, 3 years, and I say no. I say no, you love me, but you are with other people. That's why no. She calls me one last time and I say, stop it. I was a mess. There was no room in my life for love. It's just anger, taking drugs to run from problems, from home, abusive parents. I, I didn't know if she was the drug I needed. And then 10 years later, I find her. 10 years. In that 10 years, I learned everything of how stupid I was. And I vomit all of my feelings to her. It was too much. I was too clingy because I didn't want to lose her again. But not only did I make the greatest mistake of my life, but I hurt her. I hurt her so much. With my words. And knowing that I can't take it back. The pain is so crazy. They say you only love once, that's it. She is that love. Now I'm aware of this mistake and these feelings, and I need to learn to not make, to not let it consume me, to keep on going, but that is the point. I don't want to keep on going without her. And that is the problem that no therapy can fix. Nobody. Yep. I'm just overwhelmed with grief, and to continue doing other stuff means I would have to forget. How can you forget? Being in this position, that's the only way you have to forget, and there is no end, there is just forget. Forgive yourself. How can I forgive myself? I tried. I did. I was so stupid. I know it. It's knowing it is does not help. I had many women go for me, you know. I never knew why. Some of them I had to also block because I thought that's for the best. But that is the worst thing, the worst pain. But I was a kid. I didn't know how to talk. Before she blocked me, I told her multiple times I'm sorry, and I feel like she heard it, but she doesn't really. She doesn't really think I mean it. I told her how I looked for her for so long time. I would try to look up her names and profiles and for a day or two, and then not find anything, and then dismiss it. And then next year look again, and nothing. Nothing. And then next thing I know, last year I find her. I found her in. I found a number from an old chat, and thank God for Facebook. She picks up the phone, and I die. We talk for 4 hours. All the way I'm crying and sobbing. I couldn't believe it. Yep. Now I'm in this spot. She blocks me now. And it's impossible to find her. She blocks everything. Every new incoming number, everything is blocked. I wrote messages from different accounts and SMS services, and I never know what if she receives any of it. Never know. I never know what to say, what she knows. I type over and over again. I hurt her so much. Her pride says no. Her head says no. I can't blame her for that. But I know her heart says yes. But she's too stubborn. I know it in my heart. Whatever that is worth. When crying like this, I don't know if this has to be therapied. My reaction. Probably. I think it's alright if I can keep going with my life. Which I find hard to do. If you block someone, you make it as if you are dead for them. They have things to say, but no, you will never hear it. You take away all their power, all of their ability to get closure. And I don't want it for my sake, for an egotistical. I just know that we can be happy together and I can make her happy. But now I was too dependent on her. That's how the tides have changed. If you think you know, you don't know. You never know. Nobody ever knows anything. The only certain thing is death. Been through so much shit, dude. So much. And I come out of it. But this, it is not that I am stuck here, not having a perspective of meeting other people, of trying to find somebody else. Is that I don't want to, because I want her. With all her flaws, I don't care. I'm gonna check out online therapy, see what that's about. It's probably very expensive, but much more convenient and probably much more sophisticated. I'll try it and see if they can coach me of how to deal with this. You know how they say hope dies last? The only thing that keeps me going is thinking for 1%, maybe 2%, that she's gonna unblock me and talk to me. And if I didn't have that hope, I don't really know what to do. That is the problem. Having this dependency on somebody else's reaction. I get it now. You're not autonomous. But you have to understand, how do I say this? It's my second player slot is blinking. And she's got the controller. But she's not connecting it. And life is a two-player game after all. All my life, 30 years, I thought I don't need anybody. It was just my anger. Trying to protect myself. Trying to protect others. My anger consumed me. And now I have to pay the toll. Let's watch this. Your heartbreak will get better the moment you watch this. By the way, I watched a bunch today, and if I get a sense of this is just bullshit, or they're trying to sell me something, or it's a narrative that I can't identify myself, I just close it. So let's see.
Heartbreak will get better the moment you hear what I am about to say. Yesterday, I sat with David Kessler, the world's foremost expert on grief, to talk about the subject of heartbreak and how to find happiness again after we have had our heart broken. And one of the things that became eminently clear, if it wasn't clear to me before, was that heartbreak and grief are like this.
People always want to know from me, which grief is the worst? Is it this kind of death? Is it a divorce where they're still rejecting you every day on this planet? Like, what's the worst? And I always go, yours. Yeah. Your grief is always the worst. It's always the worst. Forget everyone else's. It's just you.
Grief, David said, is a change you didn't want. And what is heartbreak but a change you didn't want? When someone leaves us, when someone betrays us, when someone decides that they no longer want us, that is a change that we did not want. And the result we typically call heartbreak, but that heartbreak is a kind of grief. It's a grieving over a person we have lost that we'll likely never have back again. It's a grieving over a future that we thought we would live out, but is no longer our reality. It's the unwelcome arrival of a reality, a new future that we did not plan to begin today and are probably not ready to start today. But the heartbreak I wanted to talk with David about was not simply the heartbreak of a romantic partner who had left us, but heartbreak in general that can occur in all different forms in our life. Because we can be heartbroken in love, we can be heartbroken in life. Heartbreak is a certainty of life, and we are all going to experience it. Now, when I was talking to David, something interesting happened. The truth is that as part of something that I am creating for you, in the next couple of weeks, I haven't told you about it yet, but I will at the end of this video. I was speaking to David on your behalf, but he said something at the beginning of the conversation that quickly brought me into the frame in a way that I never expected. David said something that the moment he said it, I felt my own emotions coming up.
We go into comparisons in our own mind. Oh, my grief, my heartbreak's not as much as theirs, or because of this time element, all that. And I always tell people, when you're in your comparing state, you're in your mind, and you don't have a broken mind, you have a broken heart. Oh. And we have to go into our heart.
And of course, we do this sometimes, don't we? We may have dated someone for a month, and when that person decides they don't want us, or ghosts us, or it fizzles out, we may feel heartbroken, but not feel entitled to feel heartbroken in the way that someone who has been dating someone for 2 years and it breaks up is heartbroken, or someone who's been in a 30-year marriage and is now going through a divorce is heartbroken.
Oh my
but what
God.
David said is that this is all very logical reasoning, and it's not your mind that is broken, it's your heart. And when David said that, I thought of my own heartbreak, not a heartbreak in my romantic life, but some of the great heartbreaks of my life in general. I felt myself starting to tear up, and I actually tried to carry on as if nothing was happening in the middle of this conversation. I thought, I don't know if David can see right now that I'm getting upset, but I'm going to keep going because I have lots of questions I want to ask David, and I don't want to get derailed. But David was happy enough to derail it for me.
But I also want to say what I saw on your face, and you and I don't know each other that well yet, hopefully. There was something that hit inside of you, and I can tell you, it's a little unattended grief. and we all live with some unattended grief. I mean, right now, that sadness in your eye, there's something there, and we all have it.
And I then had to consider, while I was helping all of you, what grief I had not attended to in my own life. And I'd love to invite you now with me to think about what grief, what disappointments in life, what heartbreak in your life have you not attended to? And why don't we attend to these things? You know, why is it that my instinct, aside from being live on camera, helping you guys, why is it that my instinct was to move on from that and not sit with it with David, but to speed right past it? It's because that pain that's behind it is so difficult to confront. David said to me, I am the only grief expert who has studied buffalo. And you may think, what do buffalo have to do with grief and heartbreak? He said, well, buffalo, when they sense a storm coming, they start heading towards the storm. Because they know that by heading towards the storm, they will be in the storm for less time. The storm will be over for them faster. But what we humans do is we constantly try to stay a few feet away from the storm. And by doing so, we remain in this storm's orbit indefinitely. And we have all sorts of mechanisms for keeping the storm a few feet away. We may numb ourselves. We may move on anytime the situation gets close. We may try and avoid any potential trigger for our heartbreak anytime it comes up. We may go to an emotion that's more comfortable for us to go to. I know that there have been certain situations in my life, and I'm not speaking past tense. I'm not talking about 5 years ago. I'm talking about right now. There are certain situations in my life that it's been easier to be angry about. And one of the things that David said that floored me was that anger is a bodyguard for pain. And so I had to explore what pain is underneath that anger. What pain is underneath your anger? You know, maybe if you think back to a relationship that the way it ended, or the betrayal that you experienced, that thing that person did to you or made you feel, that anger that it brought up for you that maybe stayed around for a long time. What was underneath that anger? Because I know what was underneath my anger, what is underneath my anger, is sadness. It's that grief. And you know, there are plenty of things in my life that feel like there's plenty of storms I've headed right into very bravely, and there's other storms in my life where it's felt too scary to get close to that emotion. And as David put it, you know, we have this fear that if we start crying about something, we'll never stop, so we avoid it altogether. But in my life, and what this conversation with David proved to me was, I want to go towards those storms, every single one of them that I have been avoiding, because I've done a lot of healing with myself in the last few years, and I've had the help of some amazing people, but I want to go further, and I want to go into those storms that I've been ignoring or staying a few feet away from. You may want to do the same, because the truth is, none of these emotions can stick around forever if we actually head into the storm, if we act like the buffalo do, as David says. And allowing ourselves to feel these emotions, deeply feel them, engage with them, is a form of showing up for ourselves and tending to ourselves. If we really feel our own sadness, the disappointment of what has happened to us in our lives, then we have an opportunity to be there for ourselves. We have an opportunity to exercise self-compassion. But we can't exercise that compassion for things that we're ignoring. In order to have compassion for ourselves, we have to come to terms with the loss that we have experienced. And the loss might be something that came and went, or it might be the feeling of loss that comes with something we never had. The coming to terms with something that we never had. And the pain of that. That's a form of showing up for ourselves, that self-compassion. We live in a culture today that sort of demonizes the idea of feeling sorry for oneself, especially where I'm from in England. The idea of feeling sorry for yourself is about the worst thing you can do. But what we have to do is look at feeling sorry for yourself in a different light, as feeling for yourself, for what you have been through. The only time that feeling sorry for yourself is a problem is when it goes hand in hand with a lack of accountability and ownership. If I spend my whole life feeling sorry for myself and I never do anything about it,
We are
that's when
past
we
these
can waste
steps.
our lives. But what if feeling for yourself was doing something about it? What if feeling for yourself was the root to doing something about it? Haven't you ever had a conversation with someone where they felt for you? They like that, yeah. This
We're gonna have to skip this.
ultimate heartbreak expert.
I'm sorry, I have to skip this. I don't think he's gonna tell anything else or have like a twist or something in here. I understand what he says. It's a good point, but I'm past this, way past.
series where
Gonna work on the layout. This might be too wide. Stretch. Watch okay, let's watch this. How childhood trauma and unresolved issues impact adult relationships by Love Quest with Lisa Conception.
Have unhealed childhood wounds. Got my printout of content, the points I'm going to make with you. Get yourself a notebook and a drink because we're going in deep with this content today. So this is about inner child healing, right? So if you're on YouTube and you're searching for inner child healing, this is the video for you. I am Lisa, the Love Life Coach. I founded a company called lovequestcoaching.com. You can go there, get your free love life assessment. You can click the link in the description for more info on that. But one of the things that I teach my clients is a technique of inner child reconnection and reparenting. And this is really helpful because it allows you to go back in time and rescue your little inner wounded child from a situation that caused them trauma and led them to believe certain things about themselves and about how they get love from the caretakers, the adults around them. So let's get into this because this is something very common that people have, and they often don't even hear about this modality of inner child work until you know what hits the fan. There's a divorce, there's a massive upheaval in life, and they spiral out. And adults don't know why they are so lost, feeling so ornery, feeling so down in the dumps and depressed. And really, the thing is that there is a wounded inner child who has been neglected, ignored, avoided. Not intentionally, though. You didn't know. You did not know. You were just going through life doing your thing, not knowing that there are versions of you from the past, oftentimes younger, who have been neglected, who never received the attention, care, concern, guidance, discipline when necessary that was needed the right way as a kid. So what happens? What happens in your adult relationships when you have unhealed childhood wounds? You have negative situations coming up in your relationships, patterns that you see over and over. And I'm going to share a bunch of those. So if any of this rings true for you, let's connect. I would advise you to go on over to lovequestcoaching.com. Start off by getting the free Love Life assessment. Tell me a bit more about what it is you're going through. The assessment gives you prompts. It gives you little boxes. You add in your answers to the questions that are posed, and I read it directly, and then I give you a printout back. I give you a detailed email response. So you could print that out. You could bring it to therapy. You could sit around your Sunday brunch table with your girlfriends, and go through it, right? Or you could actually book a one-on-one session with me. So let's get into it. This is what you would experience in relationships if you have unhealed wounds, inner child work to do. Number one, people pleasing and difficulty setting and keeping boundaries. So if you think you have all these boundaries, but you do not know how to enforce the boundary, and you certainly do not know how to assert a consequence,
I just can't right now. I just can't. I don't have. I, I can't listen to anything. I can't watch anything. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't. I don't know. What do I do? I'm gonna watch this first. How to move on in your life. Processing emotions by Healthy Gamer. I think this could be a good one.
The world that we live in is not the world in which our brains were developed, right? So our brains evolved for a particular kind of lifestyle. And I think what we're actually seeing is that as humanity has progressed a lot, we've lost sight of like particular things that our brain used to rely on.
Hello, Sarasaraswan Mango Prasad here. If you want to get control of your life and understand how the mind
What is
works,
this?
check out a DIY guide to mental health. The link is in description, huh?
So let's talk a little bit about emotional processing. So I want to start with a story. So I was once working with someone who was in the field of finance, and they came to my office and they were concerned that they were going to get fired. And so they came in and they said, "I'm really anxious." And I said, "Okay, well, what are you anxious about?" They said, "Well, I'm paranoid I'm going to get fired. And so as we kind of dug into it, what we found is that, this person's anxiety was sort of turning into a vicious cycle where they were afraid that they were going to get fired, which in turn means that anytime they were presenting, so they'd once a week, they would kind of present to all the partners and stuff like that about the work that they were doing, the deals they were working on, things like that. And so the more anxious they became, like the more they would stumble over their words, like, oh my God, like the partners are all listening, like, oh, like I can't screw this up. I can't screw this up. And since their mind is not on what they're actually supposed to be presenting, but is so focused on not wanting to screw everything up, what would happen? They would screw up, right? They would stumble over their words, their presentation wouldn't kind of come out clear. And so they were just really concerned and terrified. And they just had to get control of this anxiety. So they kind of came to my office and they're like, can you help me like with the anxiety? And so we talked about lots of different stuff. And it was really interesting what ended up happening. We'll sort of share what happens at the end of our talk today. But so we started working on that. And I think one of the key things that I sort of noticed as I was talking to him is that things seem to be getting harder, right? If we kind of look at people today, like I talk to a lot of people and it just seems like things are just getting harder. I get the sense that we're getting more kind of wrung out, right? As we go through life, I'll talk to people who are teenagers in their 20s and their 30s. Like life seems to just be squeezing everyone dry. And even if you look at some of these like things like the kind of anti-work movement or dating, like life, there just seems to be like more suffering. Like I get the sense that people today are going through life trying to take as little damage as possible. Because every time you like do something in your life, like it's not going to go well and you're going to like lose a piece of yourself. Like in online dating, for example, everyone's like, every single date I go on, it's like, I lose like this tiny part of myself, right? Like I went on another date, I dug real deep, I, matched with 5,000 people. I went on one date and things didn't really work out. And now it's like, am I going to be alone forever? And so it's kind of like life just, the more you go through life, the more like battered and bruised you get. And there's this kind of idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But I get the sense that when I talk to people, like they're just getting kind of, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. As they try to move through life, they're just getting more and more shriveled and kind of patched up and defunct, and like it just seems like we're not able to recover from things the way that we used to, right? And so I was kind of thinking about this because is life actually getting worse? Like, if we look at it, humanity is advancing in so many different ways. Hopefully we'll have human beings on Mars soon. Medicine is advancing, technology is advancing. Like we have commercial flights into space now. Like, we have cell phones, right? So we can do all kinds of stuff. Like video games are super cool. There's like VR technology. We developed a COVID vaccine in 2 years. Like cancer treatments are improving. Like if you look around, like things seem to be getting better, right? If you look at humanity is progressing, but why does it feel like we're getting worse, right? Why is humanity as a whole progressing, but it feels like every person I talk to who's trying to go through life is just getting like worse and worse, right? It almost feels like you start life with some amount of happiness and each negative experience you have like takes away some happiness and it's never to be gained again. I get the sense of a very limited resource that people are kind of like getting rid of as they try to go through life. And so I think we have some terms like burnout, for example, which is at an all-time high. So why are like so many people burnt out when we have so many things that make our life convenient? So if we think about what should burn us out, like what should burn us out? It's like, effort. But now I can get food delivered to my door. I don't have to sit up to work or be entertained. Like I can now do all my work or entertainment at my fingertips. I can watch Breaking Bad on the toilet if I want to. Like there's all kinds of stuff. I can take off my Switch off the dock and walk into the bathtub and then like play Switch. Like there's so much convenience. Things should be getting easier, but it feels like things are getting harder. Hey chat. Subscribing to our YouTube channel allows us to help more people with their mental health. Thanks to your support so far. Like young kids nowadays, they're so ungrateful, they're so lazy. Like, is that what's going on? Is generation, have we just gotten kind of, lazy? Like what's happening here? What's changed? Has anything changed? Is this just a perception? And what I kind of realized is that the world that we live in is not the world in which our brains were developed, right? So our brains evolved for a particular kind of lifestyle. And I think what we're actually seeing is that as humanity has progressed a lot, we've lost sight of like particular things that our brain used to rely on, took for granted so easily that now that we've sort of lost it, we're kind of really confused about what we even lost because we weren't even aware of it. And in essence, I think that's emotional processing. And as a society, what we've lost sight of is the ability to emotionally process. In fact, it was so easy to do before that we don't even think about it necessarily like a skill, right? Like we kind of took it for granted because now we have all these like resources around emotional processing, right? Go see a therapist. But like 10,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago, there weren't therapists, and it's not like human beings were having trouble with emotional processing, right? They were just kind of going about and living their lives. So I want to share with y'all an interesting perspective from like evolutionary psychology around how the brain processes emotions. And what we'll discover is, okay, once we understand how the brain processes emotions, we'll see how society has changed. And if we see how society has changed, we'll maybe be able to detect, have we lost the ability to process emotions? And then the question kind of becomes, okay, if we figured out that we have lost the ability to process emotions, what can we start to do differently? How can we reclaim the lives that we used to have so that emotional processing becomes easier, okay? So let's start with kind of how society used to exist. So the first thing is that we used to live in communal groups, right? So there's like a group of people. And so there was a limited amount of stuff to get you excited on a daily basis. There was like like the scope of conflict was like narrow, right? You maybe live in a village of, let's say, somewhere between like 50 and 500 people. And so there are only so many people you can have beef with. Whereas like now, if you look at the world today, like I can post something on Twitter and the 10,000 people that disagree very strongly with what I said can attack me on Twitter from all across the globe. Even though it's a tiny fraction of the world, right? They can still pile on and attack me. So the first thing to understand is that we used to live in kind of a communal society. And if you look at how human beings managed conflict, so let's say, look, we have some kind of conflict, and then like what would happen after the conflict? Let's say I get into an argument with someone in my town or in my tribal group, okay? What happens after that emotional exchange? So I'm kind of ramped up emotionally, right? Like, what do I do? So let's say I go like out foraging. And so I'm walking through the wilderness and I'm sort of physically paying attention to things, but mentally, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just sort of like, my mind is kind of doesn't have anything to do, right? And so my mind is kind of in idle mode. Like I'm not engaged in an argument then, but I have lots of time where my mind is idle and I'm sort of doing some physical things. We also see this with humans in terms of rote labor, right? So humans used to do a lot of like rote labor that was mentally like idle. So let's say I'm repairing fishing nets, or, you know, I'm making a fire, right? Which used to be like an hour-long endeavor, or I'm like sharpening a spear, or I'm tanning leather or something like that. Like there's all kinds of like tasks that human beings used to do all the time, which required physical effort, but essentially gave idle time for the mind. And what's kind of interesting about that is if you allow yourself to have idle time in your own mind, what you'll discover is that that's when you actually do a lot of processing, right? So if I have a conflict with someone and then I go for a walk and I give my mind
So I feel a few things he said seemed a little bit ignorant from his perspective, but it's not his fault. It's him trying to just convey to a modern audience how things have changed. And I think he knows that people back then also had troubles mentally. And he can't just brush it off as, oh, they kept just living their life. But I know what he means. I think it's important to understand that. For me, it is important because I look at him and I want to trust this person and I want to respect him and be able to gain something from what he's saying. If I think of him as just a puppet trying to make money or something, I can't even listen to it, you know? What he just said makes a lot of sense. This idle time, this processing time is very important. And I realize I don't have much of that, or lately I do have. And that's what's getting me really brittle. Because as I explained in a video that I upload on my YouTube, I'm currently I'm currently dealing with the breakup delayed. because I couldn't process the emotion and the breakup during the time in October where I was founding the company, because there was just, I really was not able to think of anything else. There was so much work to be done. And now it's crushing into me. But even during that time back then, it did not leave my mind. It was just pushed to the side. And the moment I would idle, it would all come back. So what I did was I would constantly bombard myself with either music or video or anything. Falling asleep without anything, forget about it. Forget about it, dude. Have to have some noise, something that I can cling on while I'm trying to fall asleep. Hopefully fast. So it doesn't destroy me too much. What I also realize right now is that I haven't been dreaming. I can't really remember the last time I dreamt for the past few months. Honestly, I think maybe I had 1 or 2 dreams. What I do know though is, as I said, it's always on my mind. And even when I wake up to the thought of it. It's not that I wake up and, what's going on? Oh, right, there was this. No, it's I wake up and the film is already running and I'm already in it. I am already in the depression. There is nothing triggering it, nothing. It is just permanently. So it must have been going through my head all the time during my sleep. And now, as you see before, when I just had to close the video, I just can't consume anything. No sound, no video, no nothing. My mind is forcing me to idle. This idle, however, is just a huge void of nothingness. Grieving, understanding that my mistakes got me here and I don't have the ability to make it right. Not only physically and with the tools that I have here, but the person that I want to make it right to is hiding from me. So I can't find her in the first place. I feel like I'm in a very rough spot. Okay, let's continue.
The chance to think through it, I'll sort of feel better at the end of the walk. Or in a communal society, maybe I'll go for a walk with a friend, or I'll go foraging, right, with a group of people. And then we kind of talk a little bit about what happened, and then I'll kind of like process it, even in terms of the rote labor. Where like if I'm sitting there repairing fishing nets and I had a conflict with my
Same goes for all my life.
last night, that's a good chance
all
for
my
me to
growing
kind of
up,
like think through things.
always
And
had
so
to have
one of the
music.
key things as I kind of look at
trying
it
to
and really
escape.
study, I remember reading about anthropology and some of these, tribes in New
Music,
Guinea,
video
and sort of the
games,
psychological
drugs.
impact, or what their
all the
psychological
same.
lives were like. And I was struck by the amount of idle time that they have to essentially like process stuff because there's nothing else to do. And now if we kind of think about it, how is modern life different? And what we discover about modern life is that we essentially have no time to process. That processing is actually like a subconscious or relatively automatic activity that happens over long periods of time. So we sort of know this. Right?
That is
So
big.
there are some theories in psychiatry about dreams and stuff as methods of emotional processing
Mhm.
that essentially like a lot of these thoughts and stuff will be active in our unconscious. But we sort of know that emotional processing to a certain degree like takes time and takes like space. And if we really look at what's changed in our society, it's been a loss of time and space because we don't have idle time anymore, right? Now when I'm taking a walk, what am I doing? I'm listening to an audiobook, listening to a podcast, listening
Exactly.
to music. Now,
'Cause
when
it's
I
wasted
have
time.
a conflict with someone, what happens? Do I go
'Cause
for a
everything is
walk
so
afterward?
fast.
Do I have time to think about it while I'm repairing my nets? No, of course not. I create mental distraction. So what we're starting to see is that as we accumulate these negative experiences, let's say I have a bad date, what I end up doing immediately after the bad date, it's not like I've got idle time in my mind. In fact, what I want to do is distract myself. And then what happens is as I distract myself, I don't process any of those emotions. They kind of just go dormant, right? Because after a bad date, you kind of want to like distract yourself from those emotions. But then when you wake up the next morning, what's waiting for you? What's waiting for you is those emotions. And so the second you wake up, you're like, oh my God, like that date was so terrible. And then what do? You pull out your phone and you distract yourself from that processing in the moment. And as this goes on again and again and again, what we tend to see is that our life is filled with negative impacts that we don't allow ourselves time to actually process. And even in the history of humanity, we have some events like funerals are a good example of this, where we sort of have active participation without any sort of intellectual goal. Does that kind of make sense? Like when I go to a funeral, it's not like we're there to do anything. We just kind of communally gather and we just sort of share random thoughts about the person. And something about that experience, it's not like we're there and we're going to be like, okay, what are the 16 ways in which this person impacted your life? Let's think through them. Let's think about how you're going to replace each of these things that this person did for you. That's not actually what funerals do for us. That's not how they help us process grief, right? They just sort of create this like time and space that sort of has this intensive participation without actually a whole lot of like mental work. And so our mind is allowed to almost be on autopilot and sort of process that grief in these funeral kind of situations. And if we look at life, essentially what we've lost is all of that kind of time because now we're doing something constant. This is also why I think that memes are so telling, right? Because after I've been through traumatic dating experiences, why do I love the memes that I love? And I think the reason we love the memes that we love is because we've got so much buried emotion that it takes some kind of humorous single image to evoke that emotion and it resonates with us, right? That's why we love memes. So I don't even think it's a coincidence that we've seen a rise in memes correlating with the lack of emotional processing. And the more we love memes because it speaks to what we struggle with in life, right? Because those things are things that we hold on to. We have all these negative experiences. Each date that I go on, each time I send out a job application in this massive pool, each time that someone gets back to me after I've applied to a job and they're like, hey, can you upload your resume into our specific portal and retype everything? And it's like, that's why I sent a resume, right? Each of these tiny little traumatic experiences we have, and then what do we do as soon as I'm done uploading my resume into the 16th, corporate portal because they want it formatted in their way? What do I do after 16 of those? I'm so exhausted that I'm going to go play a video game. I sure as hell ain't going to stop and think about it, right? I'm not going to like be idle. I need to get the hell away from this. And so our society has given us so much space to distract ourselves from our emotions that we never end up processing them. And this is why it feels like as we go through life, we lose a piece of ourselves with each negative experience. Because we do lose a piece of ourselves. The difference is that in the past, we knew how to find those pieces. We could get them back because we had this process of kind of emotional healing. And the lack of this also kind of explains some of these like emotional interactions and some of these things like trauma dumping on the internet, where like now I've got this like gigantic pile of emotion that subsurface has been buried down with dopaminergic distraction. And then occasionally I'll like explode on someone on the internet. Or we'll see people who get really, really caught up, right? Or very, very angry. We'll see so much tilt and anger on the internet. Why is that? It's because none of this stuff gets processed. And sometimes what happens is people will go and they'll like vomit in some corner of the internet, right? They'll make some
That's me.
rant. But even if you think about the rant, what happens to that person after they type out their rant? They just go back to the distraction. So what we're almost seeing is like these surface level emotional managements. It's not like that person is getting to the root of the issue, right? They're just ranting for a little while and then they go do something else and then the emotions pile up again and then they kind of like overflow and rant again. So what we're seeing is that our society, this sort of natural emotional processing has been replaced by this very like surface level distraction and sometimes even this like verbal diarrhea kind of stuff, which we call like venting. But venting is not the same as emotional processing. All it does is get rid of the stuff on top. And then what we really have to think a little bit about is, okay, so like, what do we do about the stuff down below? How do we actually process our emotions and start to feel a little bit better about life? How do we recover from the damage that has been done? And that's where I think that what we've really lost sight of is some of this deeper emotional work. And if we think a little bit about the deeper emotional work, what are the attributes of it, right? So the first is that it requires time. The second is it requires space. The third is it requires something like exploration. And so what we've managed to actually do is create a system of professionals that in a certain amount of, in a restricted time and in a restricted space can go deeper than you normally would, right? These are what we call therapists. In the case, there are even other kinds of professionals, right? Like coaches. If we think about life coaches or career coaches or things like that, like we have a pretty robust coaching program. What we've really found is that coaches are really good at understanding those kinds of problems and then helping you do that emotional work so that you can actually like move forward and achieve your goals. Which, going back to our original case at the beginning, so here's just a prime example of that, right? So this is a person who came in and was really, really concerned about losing their job. And so what ended up happening is we talked about it. They're like, okay, like, well, why are you so stressed out about losing your job? And what they sort of told me is that, you know, I'm really a team player. Like, I like working on teams. They were a professional athlete and had done a lot of team-oriented sports. And so that what they were really looking for is like a team. And what they really hated the most, the root of all their problems at this particular financial institution, was that it was like really competitive. It was sort of like a dog-eat-dog kind of world, right? So what would happen is if they were working on a deal with a couple of colleagues, the colleagues would try to make themselves look good by like taking the credit. And as they started taking more and more credit, the person I was working with started to feel really, really anxious because now they're losing credit for their work. People are going to think that they're a waste of space. People are thinking that they're not carrying their weight, and that triggers all the anxiety. And then they're afraid they're going to get fired. And why are they going to get fired? It's because they can't advocate for themselves in a room the way that other people can, right? They can't sort of like take all the credit because that's just not who they are. They're like a team person, not like a competitive, like I'm going to, you know, take everybody else's credit. And so 18 months after this person came into my office requesting help with anxiety so that they wouldn't get fired, they actually decided to quit. And this is exactly the value of emotional processing. Once you start to figure out, we have these surface level emotions that we deal with. But once you actually start to do that deep emotional work, you start to figure out, okay, what is it that I dislike about this place? How are these experiences actually affecting me? How are these experiences changing the way that I look at myself? How do I want to look at myself? How do I want to live in this world? What kind of stuff do I actually want? And once we start to do that deep emotional work, and once we actually figure out, okay, this is deeply how I feel about it. Once I give myself time and space, and keep in mind that this person worked with a professional for 18 months, discover what you actually want. Process each of those events and how they made you feel about yourself. And then ultimately, what you're going to be able to do is quit. You'll be able to be free of it. You'll be able to actually manufacture your own destiny. You'll be able to actually make decisions that are aligned with who you are. But we've lost sight of who we are because we're so busy distracting ourselves and having these emotional volcanic eruptions without ever actually getting to the root of it. So people may be wondering, okay, practically, like, what does this entail, right? How do I do this? This sounds great. So let's remember that there are a couple of things that if we kind of look at anthropology, we can sort of look at what human beings used to do to process. And we can try to create those in a sort of targeted way. So the first thing at the top of my list is journaling. And journaling is a little bit tricky because people will say like, oh, like you should journal. But then I don't know if y'all are like this. I'm kind of like this where I didn't know how to journal because everyone says you should journal, but no one teaches you how to journal, right? Because even journals are like private. It's not like if I started journaling at the age of 12, no one's supposed to read it. So how am I supposed to get feedback on whether I'm journaling properly or improperly? And that's where some people say there's no proper way to journal. It's for you. But this is what's really frustrating is if you're kind of like me, where you're kind of like a logical, scientific person, if people are in touch with their feelings, they can figure out how to journal on their own. But I don't know how to journal. I need to understand what's the point. What am I trying to do? And they're like, that's not the point of journaling. No, BS. It can be the point of journaling, right? So no one teaches us how to journal. So I'd love to do it with y'all today is just teach you a little bit about journaling. So there are a couple of different ways you can journal. The first is that you can write about experiences that are emotionally charged for you. This is the simplest way to journal. And the cool thing about journaling is that it doesn't have a particular endpoint, right? So when you say, well, what am I supposed to write about? How do I know when I'm done? Well, it kind of doesn't matter because the journaling itself, it's not about doing the journaling the right way or the wrong way. It's that the journaling is going to be a substitute for that sort of idle work and giving your mind time to start processing. And then your mind will do the subconscious processing on its own. So I would say just write about experiences that are emotionally engaging for you. And what does that mean, emotionally engaging? It means things that made you feel good or feel bad. Now, sometimes people may be kind of confused and they're like, okay, but like, I don't want to journal about that. right? So sometimes people run into resistance around journaling, around emotionally active experiences, which makes perfect sense because they're emotionally engaging, and sometimes we try to avoid that crap. And since we want to avoid that crap, that's how we end up in the dopaminergic crap, right? That's how we end up in video games and social media and Twitter and Reddit and memes, because we're trying to avoid it. So then the other thing that you can do, if that's even too emotionally charged for you, you can write about what happened or this week. You can just jot down thoughts that you have, things that you want to think about, things that you want to jot down, right? And you may say, but then what's the point of that? Like, I don't need to recap what happened this week or what happened today. That doesn't do me any good. And that's where, once again, I think you're kind of missing the point, which is that the goal is not cognitive. The goal is not to logically decide at the end, like pros and cons lists. That's not what the goal is. The goal is to actually remember what we're missing in society is time
Just
and
processing.
space. Idle time for our mind.
That's
so
what
we
I'm
can
doing,
kind of
though.
Digest what
Also with the
happened to us.
journaling, that's my
So
YouTube
all
right
you
now.
need to do is engage in some kind of activity that gives your mind that time and space. It actually doesn't need to be very goal-oriented. So you can write about emotional experiences. You can write about your day. You can jot down thoughts or ideas or things that you're interested in. All right, so sometimes when I journal, I'll kind of make notes about philosophy or science or what I think is wrong with the world. And all of those things can be incredibly productive, because what we're really trying to do is give our mind some more of that time and space to actually do that deep emotional work, which it'll do on its own. You don't have to speed it along. Now, a couple of other things that people will do to sort of help with emotional processing. So you can, of course, work with a professional. So especially depending on the kind of processing you're trying to do, I'd say a therapist is a really good idea. If the kind of processing you're trying to do is to try to figure out, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Am I looking for direction, or am I looking to unburden myself from the past? If your primary goal is to unburden yourself from the past, I definitely recommend therapy. If your goal is to try to figure out what you want from this life, I think coaching or spirituality is actually like a better fit. So there are other things that I think are really, really conducive to this. So remember that the requirements that our ancestors used were sort of rote physical activity with mental idle time. So any activity like that, I think, will sort of help you emotionally process. So my personal take is, like, I love hiking. And we sort of know this, right? We know that when people go hiking for 3 months in the mountains, they come back as different human beings, right? Like they know what they want from life. They found themselves in the Himalayas after a 6-month hike. And they just become different people. And if you kind of think a little bit about that, well, hold on a second, how does that work? Well, essentially what they did is gave themselves a steroid shot of emotional processing. They gave themselves so much idle time and physical activity that they processed a bunch of stuff. And it all happens somewhat subconsciously, that they come back as transformed people. So nature, I think, absolutely helps, but it's really those couple of components, that you have to have some amount of physical demand with mental idleness, without a clear mental goal, because that's not really emotional processing. So these are a couple of tips that I'd really suggest if you're someone who feels like going through life just takes more and more out of you. What I've really found is that people really struggle with this, because every experience has to be perfect, because you can't afford the loss. Does that make sense? Like, you can't waste your life dating this one person, because if you've wasted 2 years on this person, what are you going to those 2 years are gone and you're never going to be able to get them back. And we've lost the ability to recover from our injuries in life, which is part of the reason that we've become so miserly with actually making commitments, right? And if I can't recover from the emotional damage, if I'm going to be traumatized by dating this person, I have to be so much more hesitant to date them in the first place. As I become hesitant to date them in the first place, I stop actually living life because I'm afraid of making mistakes. And so I think what we've really lost more than anything else is the ability to emotionally process. And as we get little pieces of our soul clipped away by the experiences of life, and as we turn to technology, we don't really allow ourselves to heal and recover from it, because technology is so good at distracting. And so if you find yourself in this kind of situation, I'd strongly recommend you take a look at emotional processing. You start to do some of these activities like journal or meditate, or go see a therapist or coach. Or if you've got the time, go find yourself in the Himalayas for 6 months. That's fantastic. Go do that. But in the absence of that, hopefully this has been a little bit helpful. And if you want to start somewhere, start with journaling.
Amazing video, amazing advice. It does work, absolutely. And it does not work in my case right now. However, I have done exactly this. I went in the Himalayas. Guys, you have no idea how many walks I went on for hours in the woods and finding myself dealing with all the demons in my past. As I said, I have a bunch of trauma from childhood, and I think I've been through all of it. I confronted my parents and confronted people who've wronged me, who I've wronged. I've been through all of them. Checklists. Even people that I haven't seen for a very long time, I messaged them, told them I'm sorry. How things were. They were like, what? I don't even remember these situations. It was still on my mind. And it was very beneficial having this idle time, and I had a lot of it. I remember a few years ago, especially after COVID, there was another of these situations. Because during COVID, I had a very big low. Very, very big low. And this helps. So try it out if you're in this situation. Yeah. Sadly, it doesn't help me right now. If I put this advice onto my situation right now, I just get more depressed. I want to journal what makes me happy and what makes me sad. Don't even ask. It has everything to do with her. Everything that makes me sad is her not being in my life. And everything that makes me happy is doing it with her. So what do I do now? What do I journal? I'm gonna check out the channel. Maybe we can find some more stuff. Why therapy sucks for man. Why finding purpose is so hard today.
All right, so shall we talk about
Let's watch this. How to stop being so clingy. So, the current heartbreak is due to my clinginess. I do believe. And that is, I was so clingy because she was so clingy in the first place. And that was what turned me off. And then after years of reconnecting, I thought that's what she wanted. She said she wanted to be my best friend, my best everything. Me, only me, us. And that's what I wanted to give her every day. So I was clingy, I suppose, asking every day, how are you? What are you doing? Honestly, for me, that is not being clingy. But after I did that, after she said she needs space, even if I just asked, how are you doing? What are you doing? Once a day, and then it became once every other day, she still said I'm too clingy. So at this point, I'm confused. What do you think? I just wanted to make it right. Just wanted to give her what she wanted, what I thought she wanted. So let's watch this video. How to stop being so clingy by Healthy Gamer GG.
should we talk about clinginess? I, 18M, have noticed a pattern in my relationships with women. We would get to know each other, we're texting for hours, we're making jokes, we're just having a lovely conversation. Then the next day we start texting again, but with a little less engagement. And as time goes on, the other person just completely stops responding, even though we had a lot in common. So I tried to flip the script. Instead of sending good morning texts, I would just text when I have something interesting to say. Instead of giving compliments, I would maybe tease in a playful way. Instead of caring about the other person, I literally didn't give a crap what happens to them. And for some reason, that worked. Every time I texted them, they would reply back pretty much straight away, and they would reciprocate the same energy I give. So what's the point of having a relationship if I can't be interested in the other person for them to be interested in me?
That is such a dilemma. That is when they say women want an asshole, right? When they don't want the good nice guy. The good nice guy saying good morning. I know that feeling.
It's a really common experience, right? So if you're someone who finds yourself, it's a really unfortunate conclusion or trajectory that this person is going through, which is I engage with someone, I get super excited, we have a wonderful time, and then over time, my relationship with them slowly extinguishes. And so what I have to force myself to start doing is like stop caring. It's like stop being like authentic, like I'm going to stop complimenting them. I have to train myself to not care about them.
Exactly.
And then what happens when I train myself to not care about this person, I actually get like better responses, right? The response that I get is more of what I want. They respond more to my texts. And so what's happening is this person is sort of like struggling between what they kind of consider like being like an authentic good person, which hurts me and doesn't get me what I want, versus kind of being sort of an asshole and being less kind, which sort of gets me what I want. right? And then then this person kind of struggles, and then they're like stuck between one of two places. Do I become clingy or do I become an asshole? And it's really unfortunate when people find themselves in this situation because they like tend to wind up doing one of the two, and both of them are actually toxic, right? We don't want to become clingy, but we also don't want to like, start not caring about the people that we want to form relationships with. Like that's not healthy over time, but it happens all the time. Very, very classic. So what's going on here and what do we do about it? So the key thing to start with, as always, like so at HG, we talk about a principle that I learned in medicine, which is that good diagnosis precedes good treatment. So what we want to do is start by understanding the problem, right? And that's not exclusive to medicine. If I have flooding in my house and a plumber comes over, they have to start by understanding, okay, where's the leak coming from, right? If you go to a mechanic, they have to diagnose the problem before they fix it. So in that same way, within yourself, you have to understand what's going on before you can start to correct that behavior and ultimately like go to a kind of healthy place. So little bits of advice. The first thing that I've noticed about people who get really, really clingy, I wasn't going to do iPad for this, but maybe I should, is that the first thing they should kind of scale back on is like the intensity of the first interaction. So there's a saying that, the brightest flame burns out the quickest, right? And so in any kind of relationship, like I've just noticed this a lot. I mean, I've noticed it kind of clinically. So this is like a well-described experience of people with like borderline personality disorder, where they tend to have very, very intense, like rocket fuel level relationships that then run out of fuel and then collapse. So I'm not saying that everyone in this situation has borderline personality disorder, but it's just something that we've seen a lot, or I've worked with a lot. So how to avoid getting clingy? Let's start there. And then what we need to do is first of all recognize that like this person has two options. Either they go the clingy route or they go the uncaring route. And what they find is that this leads to extinguishing interactions. And this leads to increasing interactions. And what this person wants is increased interactions because they're looking for friendship or romantic relationships, right? And so what they sort of end up doing is learning that, oh, like what's like, maybe I go down this route. So the first thing that we want to understand is like, what's going on inside, right? Like, how do you feel when you're texting for hours the first day you meet someone? That sounds a little bit excessive to me. So it sounds to me like a bright candle that's going to burn out quickly. And this is just something to understand in relationships, right? Is generally speaking, like relationships, healthy relationships tend to form slowly. So if you think about the interaction for people, with healthy relationships, it tends to go like this. So this is time, and this is level of interaction. Right? If we look at like the formation of unhealthy relationships, oftentimes it can be like this. Right? This is time, level of interaction. And so sometimes you can absolutely have this kind of relationship, right? Where it's like intense and it just, it builds and it stays high. But I would say that generally speaking, these two curves, this one and this one, are way more common. So the main thing to really understand is, what are you trying to get out of this relationship? Because I think oftentimes what happens is if you're like complimenting a girl, like, are you like, that's kind of interesting, right? Are you like, what are you doing there? So generally speaking, I don't really compliment people that I have relationships with. I may appreciate them from time to time, but I don't like open up with a bunch of compliments. Because usually like that signals something else. Are you like, so you have to start by figuring out what is going on within
What
you.
does it signal?
So when you're texting someone for hours, like, why are you texting them for hours? Are you genuinely enjoying the interaction? Are you hopeful?
I was not a single day I told her not, but I didn't tell her how pretty she is, how much I love her. Not a single day. And I would have never stopped. Until the day I died. Because that's how I feel. So that is toxic. So I'm toxic.
That this will turn into something? Are you just genuine? Like, are you just kind of chilling and having a good time? Because if you're chilling and having a good time, then it shouldn't really matter to you that things kind of fizzle out over time, right? Like, it shouldn't matter because you're just appreciating the moment, and the moment isn't going to last forever. So if I'm like walking down the street and I see a beautiful flower and I smell the flower and I'm like, wow, that flower is amazing, and then I just move on with my life. So if this is truly what you're doing, then it shouldn't bother you that the next day they don't text, right? Because you can just appreciate the interaction and move on. But chances are you're hopeful or you're attaching some kind of expectation.
Okay.
And this is the key thing to understand. Because when you attach an expectation, oftentimes done subconsciously, like you're kind of lonely, you're kind of interested in this person, you do want to ask them out, and you start complimenting them, and like you're kind of like gearing up to ask them out, you want them to like you, you're kind of like love bombing them a little bit, right? You're trying to stack the deck in your favor. You're creating an expectation. And if you're not transparent with that expectation, if you're not transparent with that intention, what it's probably going to lead to is like some kind of miscommunication over time, because you're saying one, like you're doing one thing, you're intending one thing, but you're kind of saying something else. You're not being kind of explicit over it. And then like the person doesn't understand what's going on in your head, right? Like, because you're not telling them. In fact, what you're sort of doing is like even misleading them in the worst case scenario.
This triggers me. I have flashbacks. In my case, though, I told her how beautiful she is and how much I love her every day. And she knew the intentions. I told her one day I'm gonna marry you. And she said, don't love bomb me that much. I really try to not make it a routine. Maybe in the morning while I say good morning. And then that would be it. Direct love bombing. This hurts right now a lot.
Scenario. And then what happens is they don't respond the way that you want to. So like this sounds like egregious to me. Sending a good morning text? Dude, I have never sent a good morning text to anyone that I don't have some kind of serious relationship with. Like, even close friends of mine, like I don't send them good morning texts. Like the only people that I will send good morning texts to are people that I have intimate relationships with.
Yeah, as I said,
so this
she was supposed to be my
so
wife.
I don't know
so.
if this is the kind of thing where Dr. K is a boomer and like this is normal now, but like I don't send good morning texts to my friends. Like I sent like good morning text to my girlfriend. Like I sent good morning text to my wife. I may imagine at some point that I will send good morning texts to, you know, maybe my parents or brother or like, you know, kids one day. I'm sure I would want a good morning text from my kids when they're old enough to text. But this sounds to me to be like quite intimate. And so this is where I don't know what the standard is. Maybe that's normal now, but like this could be the kind of thing where like, you know, you have one really, really like intensive, long, lovely conversation, and then you start sending good morning texts and the person is like, wait, this is a level of intimacy that I'm not comfortable with. Like yesterday we were talking about how awesome Dune is and how much we love the, you know, the revival of science fiction and fantasy, and the next morning you're like, good morning, beautiful. Like that seems kind of like romantic in nature to me. And this is where I'd sort of say like be explicit if you have an intention. So what kind of expectation you should have? Like if you're romantically interested, just ask him out. Right? Just do it. Like if you want to ask someone out, just ask them out. Don't piddle around. And if you're afraid of rejection, which is oftentimes the reason that people don't ask people out, right? like you're afraid they're going to say no. So let me compliment them a lot. Let me tell them how awesome I am. Let me convince them that I'm worth going out with. And then I will ask them out. And during that time, you're like doing all these weird things, like you're sending flowers and crap like that. And it's like, why is this person saying, oh, you're so sweet? But you're not asking them out. So then you kind of get friend zoned.
I think I was in a different relationship than her while we were both in the same. Especially after we got back together, right? We probably didn't get back together. I mean, after we got in contact back together. So I understand so much now, just from this little. It makes sense. But also it makes sense, and I am not pulling back of what I said. Because that's how I felt. And I had the intention, and I thought we had a mutual understanding of getting back together. And that is, I think, was the issue. She probably also wanted to, but much slower, and I messed it up.
Because you're not like making your intentions clear. And then you ask them out, and then like you've had this expectation, and then that expectation gets dashed, right? So I think if you want to ask someone out, just ask them out. Next thing is about the clinginess. So what are you getting? Like, what's going on? So this is where I would really think a little bit about when you have this awesome kind of this relationship here, what emotional needs are being met? Because when we think about clinginess, this comes down in essence to emotional needs. Okay? So when I'm clingy with someone, like they're giving me something. Like why, like let's even think about the word cling. So, you know, a couple years ago when we first put our kids into like daycare or whatever, like they cling to us, right? Children will like cling to their parents when they feel like unable to be on their own. They don't feel safe. You know, you cling to, like, even if you think about stray cats, like if you feed a cat and they start following you around, they're kind of clinging to you, right? You're meeting some kind of emotional need. Now, what tends to happen, the reason we get into clingy relationships is because people inadvertently meet a high, intense emotional need of ours. So this is where like you're texting this person, it's like, wow, like this is amazing. This is what I've been craving this entire time. And so for you, like let's look at the interaction, okay? So let's talk about intensity of interaction. And then here's you, right? So the intensity of interaction is really high. And then for them, like it may be like here. And then in this mismatch is like when you start to get clingy, because then when the next day rolls around, right? Like you're texting at this level, good morning, compliments, because you're trying to get them to do what they did yesterday. You want that again. You're like, oh my God, that felt so good. I felt so heard. I connected so much. I didn't feel alone. Like that was awesome. Give it to me again. And so you open out strong out of the gate. But then they kind of respond with this. And then what happens over time is that the more of a mismatch there is, the more the communication is going to decrease. Okay? Because if it's like a mismatch in communication, it's kind of think about, you know, like friends that you play games with online. Like y'all are kind of both on the same page. They're like some people that are like messaging you every day, hey, you want to play Dota? Hey, you want to play Dota? Hey, you want to play Dota? And if you don't play Dota that often, like that mismatch is going to lead them to start asking other people and you to like not respond to them every day. And over time, like the people that you end up interacting with are the people that are sort of like on your level. And so why is this person getting more response when he stops caring? Because stopping to care is the way, so this is where his emotional needs are. This is where the person he's engaging with are. And when he stops caring, he's like artificially and arguably toxically reducing his emotional need, right? So when I like numb myself by 50%, then we're kind of on the same page. And then like our communication actually increases over time because we're both like in the same place. And so this is the last thing that I'd say. First thing is to understand your emotional needs. And then the next thing is to like recognize like, okay, what are this person's emotional needs? Because if we look at this, what's absent from this entirely is any understanding of the other person's experience, right? It's just about what I think, what I need, what I'm expecting. There's a complete lack of understanding of, okay, what does this person want from the relationship? What is this person's experience of the relationship? I'm not saying this to be harmful or try to, I recognize that makes it sound like this person is uncaring. This person's 18. Like, we don't get taught.
That's the problem. I think I read the signals wrong, or she was very reserved for sure. And I was too pushy for sure. But also I thought we were together once and it's gonna happen again. And I asked multiple times, is it okay if I love bomb you like this, like that? And she would say, I will tell you if it's too much. But she never did. And then suddenly it was too much. I messed up. I can't believe it. When I found her after all this time, I was like, I cannot mess this up. But she changed. And I thought she wanted that clinginess, And as I mentioned before, that's why I was turned off before, because she was so clingy. And then now I am. I just wanted to give her what I thought she wanted. See, this is another just adds to the pile of what I think is unfair and why I would want another chance.
This stuff. Like, that's the problem, right? No one sits us down and says, by the way, this is how you form a healthy relationship. It's just like RNG, depending on what our parents are, what your home life is like, whether people like teach you this stuff intrinsically or not. I don't blame this person. I think, in fact, it's awesome that this person posted this because this problem is so common, but no one ever like explains this to us. And so what we end up doing is discovering artificial toxic ways of not caring about people that actually match their level of like engagement, right? And then we start to like see better responses. And then what happens over time is what this person is thinking is the right way to engage with people is to start being unfeeling and uncaring towards them. And if we do that, we're going to become toxic over time and that'll ruin our relationships. But that's going to be the only way that we learned how to fix it, because no one sort of, taught us what the right level of interaction is.
It's just about reducing
So
your
think a
energy,
little
matching
bit about,
theirs,
what is the other person's experience? What are they looking for?
and not being outright
You can
toxic.
even ask them. Like, you can have a, DTR, define the relationship conversation with friends. Like, I actually have those conversations with people that I play games with. I'll ask, like, questions occasionally. I'll be like, hey, like, how often do you want to, like, are you interested in playing Dota or not interested? Like, a very good friend of mine. Like, we've been tight, dude. We were, like, roommates way back, and, like, we're, like, awesome friends. And I really love playing Dota. We'll sometimes play some games together, but they don't seem to be interested in Dota. They like watching Dota. So we'll have a conversation about it. And I'll be like, hey, I've messaged you a couple times about Dota. You seem like you're not interested. Is this the kind of thing, like, you want me to message you or, like, not message you or, like, what? He's like, oh, yeah, it's got a steep learning curve, so I'm not interested in investing that much time. But I love watching it, and I love it, like, I'm down to watch anytime. I just don't want to play.
Dude, I had these DTR talks with her where we would talk about how we would have a future together, about how we won't have children, but maybe get a dog, a cat. So do you see? It's not like I was... Fuck, dude. Fuck. There was a reason behind the things I said. After all, I was trying to build a future with her. The more and more I realize these kind of things, the more I feel just like she just didn't love me, and I have to accept it. But why would she do these things then? Say these things? I know she has problems herself, but now I am to blame. This is ridiculous, dude. All right.
And it's like, cool, now I understand. So you can kind of define the relationship. You can, even with people that you kind of meet, relatively soon, you can sort of check in with them periodically. You can sort of like read between the lines some. Because like it sounds kind of aggressive to me to sort of like, ask someone, hey, do you want me to text you every day the day after you meet them? Do you want me to text you good morning every single day after we've met once? This is the kind of thing where you had a really great conversation. I think it's fine to acknowledge it the next day. Hey, I really enjoyed talking to you yesterday. You want to hang out sometime. If that's what you want, right? Understand your emotional needs and make them known. And then give other people the opportunity to meet you where you're at or not meet you where you're at. And over time, you may learn some adjustments. Like, don't ask them that the next day, right? Like, leave the ball in their court sometimes. Don't always like have the ball in your court. So like the next day, see if they want to message you. And if they don't message you by like, 4 p.m., you just shoot them a quick text, say, hey, I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. It was awesome. Hope you're doing well. And then if they don't respond, like, this is where you got to like learn how often the ball is coming across the court. Because this is what happens with people who are clingy. You become a tennis ball machine. So normally when two human beings are playing tennis, I hit the ball over to your side, right? And then I wait for them to hit it back. And then I hit it back. This is how tennis works. Now, I'm not saying some people will have very, very ironclad rules. Like if I text them and they don't respond, I'm never texting them again. I don't think that's healthy either, because sometimes stuff happens. Maybe the day that you texted them, their father got diagnosed with COVID, right? It's like, there are all kinds of reasons. So I think it's okay to like give them a couple days and text them again, and give them a couple days and text them again. And then if they don't respond, You can even have a conversation like this, which is, so I'll give you all an example of like someone, so sometimes I'll invite.
Everything makes so much sense. It's just, I just really didn't want to lose her after all this time, and I didn't know about this. Wow.
People to things, right? And they won't come, and you invite them 3 times and they don't come. Then I think it's appropriate to just ask them a question. Be like, hey, I've invited you a couple times. It seems like you haven't come. I was just curious, do you want me to continue inviting you or not? Like, I understand sometimes people are busy. Sometimes people are just like not that interested. Just help me understand. Do you want me to invite you in the future? Yes or no? That I don't think is aggressive. And if they don't respond to that, then you're done. Sometimes what happens with clingy people is it's a machine gun. It's a tennis ball machine. You're just sending text after text after text after text after text. Feels overwhelming. The person feels attacked and then they shut down, right? They put up barriers and then they end up blocking you if you're not careful. So to summarize, this kind of situation is very, very common. We'll oftentimes meet people and we'll hit it off. And we enjoy that interaction so much that like we start to get hungry for it. We attach certain expectations, certain hopes. Oh my God, this conversation was amazing. I want to have another one. I want to have another one. I want to have another one, which makes perfect sense, right? If you eat some really delicious food, you wake up the next day, you're like, man, let's go round 2. Like, let's go. Like when you start playing a video game, right? And you really enjoy it, you binge that game for 8 hours. You don't wake up the next day and not think about it at all. You're like, let's go. Let's play again. It's completely normal to have that reaction. And at the same time, this is a relationship where someone else may have a slightly different perspective. You don't really know. So you've got to be careful. You've got to think a little bit about their perspective. So if you find yourself getting clingy and they kind of shut you down because you're kind of over communicating, what can also happen is you can learn in kind of like a hurtful way to stop caring about the other person. And when you stop caring about the other person, what can happen is this scenario here, where you artificially reduce your level of communication to a level they're comfortable with. And you actually observe, rightly so, this is like a kind of an observation, that they respond better to that. You're not actually being an ass to them, right? You're just like making yourself care less so that you bombard them less. And they're actually comfortable with that. So then they respond more. And if you're not careful, what that'll end up as is you becoming kind of like toxic over time with the way that you think about other people and the way that you treat other people. Because it does actually give you the kind of response that you want. And so what should you do about this? Start by understanding yourself, right? What needs of mine are being met? Like, what am I getting out of this? Why am I doing this? Why do I like this so much? And generally speaking, what you also want to do is think about the other person. Like, where are they in this relationship? Are they as into me as I'm into them? Like, you know, give them some space, give them some time, give them some, you know, time to kind of let you know what their needs are. If they are just as into you as you are into them, they'll probably text you back. Over time, generally speaking, I think it's important to scale up your interactions slowly with other human beings. That's how relationships form, right? It's like, you know, if you meet someone and you move in with them because y'all are deeply in love a week later, those relationships, in my general understanding, are less likely to succeed. The ones that succeed are the ones that you're dating for a year or two before you move in, right? There's like a natural progression. So acknowledge that and sort of take things a little bit slower. And as you understand what needs of yours are being met, that'll be easier. And the last thing that you can do is also just have a defining the relationship conversation, like when it's appropriate. Like, you know, a lot of people aren't going to be ready for that conversation 24 hours after meeting you. Like, what is this? Like, person's like, I don't know. I just met you yesterday. I have no idea what this is. But at some point, it may be useful to have a little bit of a conversation like that. Like, hey, you know, I've invited you a couple times. It seems like you've been busy. I'm just curious. Do you want me to continue inviting you? You know, simple, yes or no. You don't have to provide justification. You don't have to provide reasoning. You don't have to explain your thinking. Just send a simple thing their way. Be a little bit patient, be a little bit forgiving. Don't over-explain. Don't share all your anxieties with them, right? Ha, I have anxiety. Ha, I'm afraid you're abandoning me. And it's like, then the person's gonna be like, this is too much for me to handle. Just ask them, hey, what do you want? Simple. Give them space. And hopefully, as you start to understand what your needs are, as you start to be a little bit more empathic towards them, your relationships will improve.
I was projecting my feelings. I thought, I don't. It was my fault. I was too clingy. I was too scared. I don't know what to say. I feel destroyed. Great clip. A lot of flashbacks. I might come back later, but right now I'm... Okay, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching this with me. I want to say some closing words for the video. But honestly, I just feel devastated right now. Because I see my mistakes. And even though I feel like she gave me other signals and literally talking about our future together, I did not respect her boundaries still. And that's what you get. I pray she unblocks me. And I can just talk one more time. Tell her everything I learned. And how I'm never gonna tennis ball machine ever again. Unless she tells me she likes it. In that case, I have no issue. Machine gunning till the end I die. Good. I think that's it for now, guys. Come back later, maybe. Thank you for hanging out. GG.